Hey everybody, it's Jason Blah here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And something that came through my feed the last few days and the last update I caught was Nick Wright talking about he's going to the hospital, getting some testing run after his show. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 out of Speechcraft and let's talk about this. All right, guys, this is kind of what I've been talking about a lot with the whole bodybuilding thing. And when people say, Jason, why do you rag on bodybuilding compared to other things related to strength or lifting related competition? Because quite frankly, bodybuilders have more problems. It is simply a far more problematic situation. I'm not saying powerlifting doesn't have issues. I'm certainly not saying strongman doesn't have issues, or CrossFit or Olympic lifting or anything else. Right? They all have their risk and issues, but bodybuilding brings a completely different element of risk that goes beyond just training injury risk, goes just beyond even steroid abuse, things like that. There's a whole nother component that's psychological and nutrition related. And that's what I try to tell people, and they don't get it. They think I'm messing with them, and it's like, look at the psychological problems that so many of these bodybuilders, even big social media people, have as a result of dieting down that lean. The overwhelming majority of you out there are not going to be able to diet to 8% body fat or 7% body fat safely. You're not going to be able to do it. And even fewer of you are going to be able to sustain it. So this whole concept is an unsustainable thing. And that's kind of like why people will ask, why don't you just cut down super rib? No, I always trim a little bit of body fat here and there. And I've been coming down successfully for pretty much a year now. Every couple months, everyone pretty much agrees I'm losing body fat. I'm not going to ever cut really ripped because it's not sustainable. Like, why would you cut to a body fat you can't sustain? Because this is the end result. And look at what happened to Nick here. Nick was perfectly fine when he was doing powerlifting before. In fact, I was very encouraging of that. When he was hitting powerlifting, he and I even made amends. We talked behind the scenes. We made a peace between us, and then I observed and complimented the fact that he was really pushing his powerlifting, and he was doing well. He was being successful as a powerlifter, right? He was being successful. Then he delved back over into this bodybuilding thing, and then look what happened. As soon as he got done with the show, he admitted he did an enormous binge. It was like something over 10,000 calories. He just gorged himself post-show. You guys know how common that is? You guys remember with the whole Brandon Harding thing of the binging that he was doing a week before his show? He couldn't contain it anymore. People were saying, well, that's all just drugs, it's all just drugs. Well, I think Nick was doing technically a tested show. And I want to remind people, just because natural bodybuilding is tested doesn't mean you're clean. But if you're going to be drug tested, most guys, no matter what they're doing, are probably going to be off anything other than non-detectable drugs, going into a show. And I'm not saying there aren't things you can do, but let's be fair. There's no way Nick was doing a bunch of tren and a bunch of tests or anything like that going into a tested show. This is not going to happen. And I think that's what he did. So you can't even blame all of that on drugs, right? You can't blame it on drugs. What can you blame it on? Dieting down, getting emaciated, becoming basically a male anorexic. And that's what competitive bodybuilding is. I mean, that is the equivalent of anorexia. You can call it whatever you want. Maybe it doesn't always have the full psychological component, but essentially dieting yourself down to a body fat that is unsustainable and unhealthy. That's what anorexics do. The only difference is that bodybuilders use weightlifting and some protein intake to hold on to their muscle better. Or in some cases, they use a bunch of drugs and they don't lose any muscle at all. Right? But you've got to look at what a lot of them do under normal conditions. The sort of caloric deficits and body fats that they're dieting to would basically make someone a skeleton. Right? It's a starvation process. It really is. And the only guys who are like, I got to whatever body fat while eating 3,200 calories. And it's like, well, you're only doing that with a bunch of drugs because that's not going to happen otherwise. You're not going to pull that off without chemical assistance. So, you didn't just do it with diet. So the guys are like, I didn't starve myself. It's like, yeah, you did. Or you used a bunch of drugs to get around starving yourself completely. So you got guys like Nick who do this, and then look what happened. He binged. And already a few days ago, before all of this, days before, what did we see on his social media? Oh man, now I'm constipated. Anyone else have problems after a big binge, after a show of not being able to go to the bathroom? So then he had GI tract issues. In other words, he overconsumed and his gut wasn't able to process everything that he was consuming, and he had some sort of issue going on where he couldn't go to the bathroom. Then he started putting the post about edema. And that means gaining water retention, swelling around the ankles, everything else. So the guy had edema happening after his show, after his binge. So he went through this whole psychological torture to do this. And I'm not even sure how he placed, but I'm going to assume it probably wasn't worth it. He probably didn't make any money out of it. This wasn't some sort of professional show that was paid. Put himself through this. Then he was so craving foods that he binged on so much food that his body couldn't handle it. Got constipated, then had edema. Then what happens next? He puts up a post. He's going to the hospital. He's getting an EKG done, some other stuff done to make sure that there's not a heart issue related to the edema, that there's no fluid in his lungs. All right, if we're talking about edema to the point of where you're worried there's fluid in your lungs or you're having heart issues, I mean, let's talk about the problems associated with natural bodybuilding. Does anybody in the world think that that isn't just as bad, if not worse, than someone who abused very large amounts of anabolics and now is suffering some health issues? Aren't we dealing with the same level of issues? That a otherwise healthy young man is now in a potentially life-threatening situation that could kill him or cause permanent organ damage purely as a result of dieting down so lean that he psychologically broke and then binged and then had a problem with all of it? So when I talk about bodybuilding being unhealthy, this is what I'm talking about. A lot of guys will say, well, I'm healthy and I'm a bodybuilder. You're probably not a bodybuilder, or you're lying to yourself about your health. Bodybuilding is a competitive endeavor, okay? Bodybuilding is one word. It's not two words. It's not body, space, building. That would mean building your body, right? Bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is one word. That is a competitive endeavor. So hopefully people grasp that. When I'm talking about bodybuilding, I'm talking about the guys who get on a stage in their panties covered in oil flexing next to other men. Right? That's bodybuilding. It has nothing to do with the fact that you like to do sets of 12 on your curls. It's not what we're talking about. Because I don't identify as a bodybuilder, and you guys see me do 5 sets of 10 on curls every upper body workout, right? That's not bodybuilding. In my case, that's called powerlifting, because that's part of my powerlifting. It improves my bench press. So it's only bodybuilding if you're doing it specifically for bodybuilding show. So that's my argument of semantics. You guys are never going to change my mind on that. You're never going to convince me to ever identify someone who doesn't compete or has never stepped on the bodybuilding stage as a bodybuilder. You're someone who enjoys lifting, whose training goals are generally hypertrophy, body composition, or to improve your aesthetics. But you're a recreational lifter, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't got to put a competitive label on it. You know, you're not a tennis player just because you go to a court and hit some balls with a racket once a week that a machine shoots at you. Okay, you got to play a tennis game to be a tennis player. So over to the point of that, I know it's an argument of semantics, but that's the point I make. Bodybuilding is bad. It's a problem. It not only has all the different health risks associated, but the psychological aspects of it. The psychological aspects of the insane or restrictive dieting that ends up happening, and the hormonal effects and brain chemistry effects of that dieting affects you psychologically in a way that can also harm your health, as we're seeing right now with Nick. Right? This is why I'm against bodybuilding. This is actually why I'm against bodybuilding. It's not because I'm upset that some guy has nice arms. It's this shit. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.